Hello, Dr. Hara. This is Team Epsilon presenting the reproductive hormones during the life of a woman, Chapter 18. Here we have a representation of a woman and the major organs involved in the reproductive cycle. In control of everything is the hypothalamus and the pituitary, from which GnRH is transmitted through the hypophyseal portal to the pituitary, which then releases other hormones that control the reproductive cycle, such as FSH, LH, estrogen, and then there are feedback hormones such as inhibin, estrogen, and progesterone. Here we have the representation of the vagina, cervix, uterus, fallopian tubes, fimbriae, and ovary. And enlarged, we have the ovarian follicle, including the ovum. The stages of the reproductive cycle that we will be discussing are puberty, menstruation, and menopause, along with diseases in which this will function as our disease location marker. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Romero Rodriguez, and I'm going to be doing the puberty portion of the female reproductive system. Puberty is a series of biological events in which a young girl undergoes physical changes and basically develops adult characteristics and ultimately capable of reproduction. LH and FSH usually remain at low levels until the onset of puberty. The onset of puberty usually happens during the young adolescent years, which usually range between 7 to 13 years of age. Over the decades, the age has decreased just because of health improvements and also nutrition availability available in the United States. And also completion of puberty usually ranges between 15 and 17 years of age. The onset of puberty is influenced by high exposures to GnRH, which is produced in the preoptic area of the hypothalamus. It is then traveled through the hypophyseal bloodstream portal, where it'll reach the anterior pituitary. Once it reaches the anterior pituitary, FSH and LH are produced there. And once they are produced there, they will be released into the circulatory system of the female, where they will travel down to the ovaries. And once they reach the ovaries, they will stimulate sexual hormones to where they will help develop sexual characteristics of the female. Such as budding of the breast, pubic hair growth, armpit hair growth, and also they will eventually experience their first menstrual bleeding. And these changes will continue until they reach the age of either between 15 or 17, like I said, and they will be fully developed by that time. And this concludes the puberty portion of the female reproductive system, and thank you.
Hi, my name is Ashley Stubing, and I'm presenting the menstrual cycle of the female reproductive system. Throughout the menstrual cycle, GnRH is secreted from the hypothalamus to the pituitary and pulses to maintain the cycle throughout the entire process. In the beginning of the cycle of the follicular phase, FSH is secreted from the pituitary to the follicle for growth and maturation. As it continues to mature, it begins to secrete estrogen back to the pituitary for negative feedback. As it continues through the process, it begins to secrete inhibin. Inhibin inhibits FSH but not LH. At the same time, it begins to secrete estrogen to the vaginal tissue for the thickening of the endometrium. As we continue through the phase, the LH surge begins. During the LH surge occurs because the estrogen and the inhibin begin to increase and FSH levels have now decreased. During the LH surge, the enzymes break down the walls of the follicle to release the mature ovum into the fallopian tube where it will progress down to the uterus. As it continues, the follicle now forms a corpus luteum. The corpus luteum begins to produce progesterone as negative feedback to the pituitary and also releases progesterone to the uterus to increase the endometrium tissue, or to thicken the endometrium tissue of the uterus. At this time, inhibin, estrogen, and progesterone have remained increased. If the mature ovum implants itself in the uterus endometrium, then HCG will be produced and the corpus luteum will not regress. In the event that this does not happen, the progesterone levels, the estrogen levels, and the inhibin levels will decrease and the endometrium tissues will slough off, leading to the period.
My name is Alejandro Romero. I will be doing the menopause stages of the female reproductive cycle. Menopause first begins as premenopause, which is about a year before a woman's last period. It consists of lowering levels of progesterone and estrogen. These lowering levels, mainly the estrogen, will disrupt the positive feedback set up by the GRNH and the LH, and also disrupt the negative feedback introduced by the FSH. Now these lowering levels, menopause is classically considered when a woman has fewer than 10,000 eggs or less, or 1 year after a woman's last period. Now during menopause, estrogen levels will fluctuate very rapidly from a day-to-day basis, going from as low as to 30 picograms per milliliter to 300 picograms per milliliter. Now these fluctuating levels are a possible symptom or a possible cause of night sweats, hot flashes, and vaginal dryness as seen. Progesterone levels fluctuating can also lead to water retention being seen in females. One therapy that is becoming more prevalent in the United States is hormone replacement therapy, which introduces more estrogen and calcitonin into a woman's bloodstream. The estrogen will help alleviate some of the normal symptoms as seen from menopause, thereby essentially keeping a woman in premenopause instead of menopause. The calcitonin introduced is used to reduce the prevalence of osteoporosis by increasing osteoclast activity and reducing osteoblast activity. That's my presentation.
Hi, my name is Aurora Robledo, and I'm going to be talking today about the diseases and disorders that can arise in the female reproductive system. So there are plenty of different diseases and disorders that can arise from any of the organs or hormones in the female reproductive system, but I'm only going to be talking about a couple today. The first of which is amenorrhea, and so amenorrhea means the absence of a menstrual cycle. And usually the problem arises at the ovaries, and it usually arises when the ovaries are with the ovaries' inability to produce estrogen. And without estrogen, the endometrial lining of the uterus does not build up, and so there is no slouching, which creates the menstrual cycle. Amenorrhea can come before puberty starts, and that's called primary amenorrhea. There can be many causes to it, and if it happens after puberty starts, it's known as secondary amenorrhea. The only natural cause for amenorrhea is pregnancy. The second disease that I'm going to talk about is hypogonadism. It also arises at the ovaries' inability to produce progesterone and estrogen. And so without the production of estrogen or progesterone, the female, if it happens before puberty, she will not develop the secondary sexual characteristics such as enlarging of the breasts or underarm hair or pubic hair. And it can arise at the ovaries, or it can also arise from the hypothalamus or the pituitary gland. And if it arises from the higher centers, then it's known as hypogonadism. And so And that's when the hypothalamus or the pituitary does not secrete its hormones, either the GnRH in the case of the hypothalamus, or FSH or LH in the case of the pituitary gland. And so this also prevents the menstrual cycle and puberty. The next disease I'm going to talk about is hypergonadism. And so this is when the ovaries produce too much estrogen. So again, it's either at the ovaries or it can also stem from the hypothalamus or the pituitary. And if it stems from the higher centers of the brain, it's known as hypergonadism. And in that case, if it happens before puberty starts, some young girls will develop precocious puberty, which is when they go through all the stages of puberty at a very early age. So the last disease that I want to talk about is Polycystic Ovarian syndrome. And so this problem arises when the ovaries produce too many androgens. And with the production of too many androgens, the ovaries creates these cystic bodies within the ovary, and this also causes the ovaries to enlarge. And so this can lead to many other disorders, and usually this stems from either the ovaries or from the adrenal glands. And it can produce other disorders such as high blood pressure, elevated triglycerides, and so on. And so there are plenty of other disorders and diseases that can arise from the female reproductive system, but that's all I'm going to talk about today. So thank you.
Thank you for your time. This has been Team Epsilon's presentation of the reproductive hormones of the female reproductive cycle.